Yaoi is most likely a term that you've heard before if you're within the anime community and probably have associated it with rather interesting fan art that you might see on Twitter/X or on other degenerate websites that you probably shouldn't be on. But if you're someone that loves romantic stories/anime or even just series with a lot of drama or comedy, I promise that you're missing out, and here's why. It may actually surprise most people within the West that most BL/Yaoi or Shonen A actually are more so aimed towards female audiences rather than male audiences due to some of the romantic/adult activities that we may see between male protagonists in these stories. These three things actually have their distinct differences, with Yaoi being the most explicit, mostly aimed towards adults, Shonen A more so being the most tame and aimed towards younger women, and BL or boys love rather being the word that holds these two categories together. But in reality, most people just refer to this as Yaoi or BL, although as you actually begin to read some of these, there are clearly different genres within these realms. In fact, before doing this video, I actually forced myself to read at least 6 different kinds of Yaoi and BL, and some of these were a lot more unhinged than others. As someone who has grown up consuming plenty of shoujo/romance anime or manga like Oremo or Mysterious Girlfriend X, and some of my favorites being Oran's High School Host Club, Nisekoi, and even more recently, My Love Story with Yamada-kun at level 999, I feel as though my mind was already somewhat prepared for just how insane or actually really well written some of these stories would be, but I was definitely wrong. Let's talk about the first yaoi I decided to read, called I Don't Want to Be Just an Omega. I was in my sister's BL manga when I reincarnated in another world. Yes, a mouthful, I know. But just so you guys can understand what genre this yaoi is, here's my bad explanation of what an omega yaoi is. If you want a much better explanation, I recommend that you guys watch this video, because I'm definitely not going to sit on here and explain what an omega verse yaoi is for 44 minutes straight. But to briefly sum it up, essentially within an omega verse yaoi, there are 3 genders, sometimes 4 depending on the artist, but the 3 are generally going to be an alpha, a beta, or omega. Alphas are generally going to be the highest of the hierarchy. They're considered the leaders or the positions of power and are generally dominant in relationships. Betas are usually going to be the most normal of the 3 within these stories, and they usually are the majority in the middle of the hierarchy. Whereas omegas in these stories are typically the lower class people or lowest in the hierarchy and have the ability to actually breed with other males and have babies with alphas, but they are generally what you would think of as housewives or house husbands and are seen as more fragile, submissive, and also have pheromones that could make alphas obsessive over them and even go into heat. There are a lot more details when it comes to roles that certain genders play within Omegaverse depending on the author once again, but this is generally what I've come to experience when reading this particular manga. The story follows 2 sibling mangakas who make manga for fujoshis, or in other words, female weeaboos, and at first have a problem writing a new character into the world, and at first don't even give him a gender. After 3 days of writing, the sister begs her brother to get her an energy drink from the convenience store, and on his way there, just like every other isekai, gets hit by truck cone. This of course gets him sent into another world, and he shortly realizes that he's woken up in the manga that him and his sister have been working on the whole time, by being introduced by 2 characters that he's worked on personally, and even pokes fun at the fact that he made their adult scenes, if you know what I mean. Immediately after finding him, they bring him to a hospital after still showing injuries and signs from being hit by a truck, and him and everyone else realizes that the main character, i.e. him, actually doesn't have a gender role yet, and of course leads to suspicion by everyone else as he pleads that he becomes a beta, that way he's not baking pies with alphas for the rest of his life. As days pass though, he runs into someone and accidentally kisses them and immediately becomes addicted to the main character, and even suspects that he put some kind of omega spell on him that attracts alphas. Although how could this be if our main character doesn't even have a role yet? Well, one thing I left out is the fact that there's a piece of paper similar to a birth certificate that he got when in the hospital, and as time goes on throughout the chapters, a symbol has been fading in right under where the gender role is supposed to be, and long story short, the main character finds out that he's been reincarnated as the new character him and his sister have been working on, and eventually his sister chooses to make that character an omega. There's obviously a lot more to the story, but considering that I do plan on having this channel being monetized and wanting to keep my sanity, I eventually moved on to to the next yaoi that I won't lie actually was one of the best written romance stories that I've read in a long time. This then brings me to the next story that I actually really enjoy, called Koko no Yumi, or The Dream of the Cuckoos. And when it comes to this one, it's only about 9 chapters long, and it had an extremely good story full of amazing plot twists, drama, suspense, and I would highly recommend it for anyone that just loves romance or anime / drama in general. The main character of the story is actually named Natsuka, who has recently moved to Tokyo from a small town in Japan after graduating high school. Although he's not going to any courses in his university and seems to just be there to be with his best friend Hakushima, who he has a romantic interest in. The thing is, he has yet to confess to him and has an adult relationship, let's just say, with a guy he met at a club, if you want to call it that, because this club is actually a place where guys pretty much meet to hook up. I won't lie, this manga is still a yaoi technically, so it does have some rather graphic / adult moments from time to time, but it doesn't take away from the story, but actually adds on to the drama within it. Eventually, after getting into a disagreement with Hakushima when being told about not making some of the best life choices, he ends up kicking him out of his place and calling the guy that he's been hooking up with, essentially, tell him to come on his bike. And once he does, he somehow, someway ends up getting into a car accident or a bike accident with the person he just kicked out. And this would then send both of them into the hospital unconscious. Once Seno wakes up, or the guy that he's been hooking up with, he starts to show signs of memory loss. And then we find out that it's actually Hakushima, and that these two people have swapped minds after the accident, which makes Natsuka very conflicted because clearly he is down bad to get with Hakushima. But his consciousness is now in the body of the person he strictly and openly admits has only been with to just hook up with. There's a lot of deeper moments in this story that had my eyeballs glued the whole time, as well as some other plot twists that would shock you, including plenty of more guy action. Gonna have to give this a 9.5 out of 10. Even though this one isn't finished yet, I really love the direction of where this is going. This one clearly takes inspiration from Death Note, as it's mentioned even a few times in the earlier chapters, and it's essentially following Hagino, a university student who is being haunted by his crush's best friend named Enamoto. After jumping in front of a car to save him, like Yusuke from Yu Yu Hakusho, leaving him unconscious in the hospital, and we later find out that Enamoto has been tasked to take Haruna, his best friend's soul. But the catch is, it's Hagino, the guy who has a crush on Haruna, that has to do it in order to get Enamoto to get out of his coma. What makes this interesting is not only wondering how in the world is Hagino going to end up getting himself to take his crush's soul, but Enamoto, as a ghost or an angel, like he claims to be, seems to have no emotion towards this at all. He doesn't care that he has to take his own best friend's soul in order to get out of his coma, and seems to be more so carefree about the situation than remorseful, or has any resentment about the situation he's in. And it makes for some pretty entertaining dialogue between him and Hagino, the main character. And I'm pretty interested in seeing where this goes, honestly. Because it's not over, I can't give it a ranking, but I may also add that this one doesn't have any adult scenes, so I'm gonna give it an 8.5 out of 10 so far for having an engaging plot and good artwork so far. When it comes to Ten Dance, this one gives more of a sports manga vibe to it and follows two competitive dancers who teach each other their dance moves in hopes of winning a 10 dance triathlon together, which is a competition where they have to master 5 standard and Latin style dances. Now, of course, considering that this is a BL manga, a lot of the training that happens does have some rather intimate moments. It's nothing too extreme from where I've read up to, and this is one I definitely feel like is certainly a slow burn, but whoever wants to read it, I mean, this is for you. I couldn't really get into it after a few chapters, and yeah, I had to move on. This one is probably the most unhinged manga / anime that I've read in a really long time, where it's essentially about this high schooler who gets bullied really badly by these 3 other students who torture him by trying to drown him, make him eat a live fish from his aquarium, and threaten his life, and he just accepts everything because he feels like he's been being a hero for the school, because they will just end up doing the same thing to other students who can't handle it, which absolutely makes no sense at all, because if kids out of high school are constantly threatening people's lives, even led a previous student into self-harm, let's just say, after multiple physical altercations on campus, they would definitely get expelled, let alone be sent to some kind of juvenile center. But anyway, later on in chapter 1, a new albino student comes in to confront the 3 bullies while they're trying to torture this poor guy, and he ends up saving him by almost drowning one of the bullies. This of course leads to them wanting to target the albino student for getting involved and leads them to retaliating in some rather petty ways, like trying to scare him with a knife or making them late for gym so that they would have to do extra work. But it clearly just doesn't faze him at all, and after a few rather short conversations with the person that's been bullied this whole time and finding out from other students why he continues to accept the torturing he's been getting from these 3 bullies, he then decides, when bro is fearing for his life, crying his eyes out, I think that's the best time to tell him, I think I like you. How about we go on a date if your bullies disappeared in Minecraft, and forcibly makes a promise with him. Even though this is really unhinged, I do find it disappointing that the rest of the story is still not finished, as this appears to be releasing a chapter once a month as I'm writing this. With that being said, I would have loved to have a 6 manga on here that I could have reviewed for you guys. I'm also not going to sit here and say on the mic that yaoi is my new favorite genre, but it's actually much more entertaining than I thought it would be. And if you would like me to talk more about anime in general, feel free to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and check out my second channel where I'll definitely be talking about some BL manga that I forced myself to read as well. I appreciate all the love and support, and I'll see all of you guys within the next one.